The phrase raise your vibration has become the most repeated instruction in manifestation culture, and I think it's the single piece of advice most responsible for stalled results. Not because the people who teach it are wrong about everything, but because it trains you to aim at the wrong target entirely. Neville did not tell his students to feel better. He told them to occupy a specific state of being as a settled, assumed fact. One is performance, the other is residency. The reason most intermediate practitioners stay stuck, running techniques faithfully, getting occasional results, then watching them evaporate, is that they have been performing when Neville was asking them to inhabit. Chasing the feeling is not the technique, assuming the state is the technique. By the end of this video, you'll have a concrete 10-minute practice drawn directly from Neville's instruction, plus the one thing that determines whether that practice actually takes root. Let's start with the first question because it exposes the whole problem. What is actually wrong with the raise your vibration instruction? The answer is a category error. Vibration in modern LOA culture means an emotional state, something you ascend to, hold temporarily, and then descend from. Teachers tell you to put on a certain playlist, journal your gratitude, meditate into a peak frequency, and the implicit instruction is maintain that peak as long as possible and the results will follow. Neville didn't teach this. This is the part of his work most modern teachers quietly replace with their own framework because the original version is harder to package. What Neville actually taught is that a state is not an emotional peak. A state in his vocabulary is the totality of what you assume to be true about yourself and your world. It is your baseline identity, the self that wakes up each morning already inhabiting a particular set of beliefs, a particular relationship to reality. You don't perform a state, you occupy it. The moment you step out of the meditation session and return to your familiar inner conversation, you step back into your old state. The vibration you chased for 45 minutes dissolves within hours. In his 1952 work, The Power of Awareness, Neville wrote, change your conception of yourself and you will automatically change the world in which you live. Not feel differently, not raise your emotional frequency, change your conception. That is identity level work, not emotional level work. These are genuinely different targets, and almost every popular LOA teacher conflates them. The vibration chaser is always on the outside of the desired reality, working to feel good enough to be let in. Neville's student occupies the interior of the desired reality and sees the current world from there. One is striving, the other is settled. Now, before I show you the 10-minute practice itself, there's a specific mechanism that keeps the state collapsing, even in practitioners who already understand this distinction. The mechanism isn't what you'd expect. I'll come to it in a moment, because it's the gap between knowing the difference and actually getting consistent results. So the second question, why does the state keep collapsing? Here is a pattern I have watched repeat with person after person in the intermediate stage of this work. Someone discovers Neville. They begin practicing SATS, the state akin to sleep, every night before bed. They're disciplined. They occupy the imagined state during the hypnagogic threshold, feel the assumed reality, carry it into sleep. And for the first week or two, things shift noticeably. Small coincidences, a lightness in the morning, sometimes a specific external change. Then the results slow. Then they plateau. Then they start wondering whether they're doing something wrong. What I keep finding is that the evening practice is solid. That is not the problem. The problem is what happens between practice sessions. Between the SAT session and the next evening's practice, the practitioner runs a completely different inner conversation. They check the external conditions in the morning and narrate them in the old language. They think in terms of what they don't have yet, what hasn't happened, when it's going to arrive. The inner monologue reverts automatically, not because the practitioner is undisciplined, but because the old inner conversation is the practiced one. It has years of repetition behind it. Neville addressed this across his Brooklyn lectures in the early 1950s. The inner conversation, he taught, is not something you do during a practice session. It is the ongoing narrative your mind runs throughout the day. And that narrative, more than any formal session, is what the subconscious accepts as its instruction. The set session plants a seed. The 23 unmanaged hours that follow are the soil. If the soil is running the old narrative, the seed doesn't compound. It gets crowded out before it takes root. Nothing about changing this requires special talent or prior spiritual development. It requires attention to the hours you have been ignoring. That's different from skill, and it's available to anyone willing to notice. Now, here is the counterintuitive piece. Most people assume that if the inner conversation is the problem, the solution is to generate a stronger emotional charge during practice, something intense enough to survive the day. That instinct is wrong. The signal Neville was looking for in the inner conversation has nothing to do with emotional intensity. Knowing what that signal actually is changes how you run the 10-minute practice. I'll show you exactly what it is now. So, the third question, what is the 10-minute practice? Neville was drafted into the US Army in 1943. He was 38 years old, stationed at Camp Polk in Louisiana. He wanted an honorable discharge to return to his New York apartment and resume his teaching. He had no external leverage whatsoever. Each night in the barracks, he would lie down and enter the state akin to sleep. In that hypnagogic window, he would assume, as a settled fact, that he was already back in his New York apartment, not visualizing it from the outside like watching a movie, inhabiting it, feeling the specific texture of being home, looking out from inside that reality, not toward it. After approximately 9 days, the Army granted him an honorable discharge under Regulation 615-360, paragraph 5. The assumption preceded the external shift. This is the part most people read past, and it's the part that matters most. Neville was not generating emotional intensity around the idea of freedom. He was assuming a specific identity in a specific situation as a settled, unremarkably ordinary current fact. The quality he was looking for was naturalness, the feeling of something being simply quietly true, not peak emotion, just this is how things are, that is the signal, and that is what the 10-minute practice is designed to install. Here is exactly how. First, choose a specific scene, not a general desire, but a particular moment, a specific room, a specific conversation, a specific instant in which the thing you want is simply already present. Interior, first person, present tense. Second, enter the scene from inside it. See what that person sees. Feel the texture of the moment, not the emotional height of it, but the settled ordinariness. You are in the scene the way you are in any unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. Third, let the scene run until the inner conversation matches, until the self-talk sounds the way a person would sound who simply already has this thing. Ordinary, matter of fact, not performing, just this is how things are. That is when you are in the state, not before. 10 minutes of genuine state occupancy at the threshold of sleep is worth hours of emotional effort during waking consciousness. Remember what I said about the soil. It's the remaining hours after the practice that determine whether the assumption compounds or dissolves. If you want a specific diagnostic for exactly which part of your day is running the old narrative and overriding your practice, I built a free tool for that. It's called the Source Code Diagnostic. Link is in the description. It walks through the specific gap, not a general framework. Here is the synthesis, and it's brief because the pieces are already in place. The reason Raise Your Vibration keeps practitioners stalled is that it's an action you perform for a limited time and then step out of. It treats the desired state as a place you travel to and back from. What Neville taught was residency, not tourism. You don't visit the state of the person who has the thing you want. You relocate there. And the relocation isn't complete until the inner conversation matches, until the self that wakes up in the morning already inhabits the assumption as background fact. The 10-minute practice is the mechanism Neville used to begin that relocation. The inner conversation discipline is what keeps it from being undone. The reason your practice sessions haven't been producing consistent results is more structural than technique error. You have been planting a new state in the evening and spending your waking hours running the old one. The 10 minutes are real. The other 23 hours are also real. And they have been outvoting the 10 minutes every single day. Seeing this is the easy half. Installing a state that holds across the full daily cycle is the harder half. And it's the half almost no protocol actually walks you through, because a diagnosis is easy to give away and a protocol is not. The source code diagnostic maps that gap for you. It's built for intermediate practitioners who understand the technique but are watching the state collapse before it can compound. It's free, and the link is in the description. Tonight, do exactly what Neville did in that barracks in Louisiana. Choose one specific scene. Enter it from inside at the threshold of sleep. Let it run until the inner conversation is ordinary. That is the complete practice. In his teachings from 1944, Neville said, "The feeling of the wish fulfilled, if assumed and sustained, must objectify the states that correspond to that feeling." Assumed and sustained. Both words matter. This video gave you the first. The work of the next 23 hours is the second. See you in the next one.